Good day to the veterans, their families, and the City of New Bedford, citizens and surrounding areas. Once again, I have guests on that are going to give some information to both the veteran and the family for help that they can get if they have certain conditions that they need some help at. Many of you don't know what's available at the Providence Hospital or any of our VA hospitals, so we try to give you some of that information if we can. Today, the young lady I have is Judith Berger. She's a licensed clinical social worker at the VA, and she also has another position which she will explain about. What type of work have you done before this?
Before coming to the VA, I worked as a social worker on an inpatient adult mental health unit at Butler Hospital. Sure. And before that, I worked in public relations briefly, and I taught English to adult learners of other languages.
So you always worked in mental health, that area?
For a long
Pretty
time,
much,
yeah.
Education, how did you get started in that? What type of study did you do? Where?
I studied anthropology and development studies, which sort of economic and social development in the third world in college, and then I went to graduate school for social work.
Okay. You're not in the military?
No,
Never?
I have no military experience.
A family, that is?
I do have family that has been in the military.
Father, brother?
My father.
Okay. All right. See, that's how it ties in to being a veterans program. I have to make sure we get a veteran in the background.
Okay.
It helps.
My father was
that way they know you know what you're talking about.
Was a veteran. Well, I don't know if that contributes to my knowing what I'm talking about, but my father
I'm sure he's talked to you about different things. Yeah, and he must be very proud of the work you're doing. The mental health and the traumatic stress disorder and the military sexual trauma. You work with all of that, right?
Yes, I work in the post-traumatic stress disorder clinic at the Providence VA.
Mm-hmm. Now, can you give us an idea exactly what they mean, this military sexual trauma and that, what was it, MST used to?
It's called MST, right, military sexual trauma,
okay.
Kind of, you know, the DOD and VA like these little acronyms.
Too many letters. Right?
Yeah, so MST is military sexual trauma, which is a term that is used in the Department of Defense and the VA to classify any sexual harassment or sexual assault that occurs during someone's active duty or active duty for training. Mm-hmm. So it runs the gamut of what a typical employer might consider sexual harassment, name calling, exposure to pictures of unwanted pictures of a sexual nature, to kind of sexual assault, which would include vaginal or anal penetration and oral sex. So it kind of runs that whole.
Do you get that more inland, which is in the States, or do you get mostly the ones that are in service overseas?
That's a good question. I've actually never tried to break it down. I would say a combination of both. We have people that happen during basic training. Mm-hmm. We have certainly a group of people, and I think it's also important to know that this also applies to men and women.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Both men and women are survivors of military sexual trauma. We have situations on ships. We have situations at bases. In Europe and Asia. So I think I don't know if it happens more in one area than another area.
And it's changed over the years as the different laws. People have accepted it, or it became worse earlier or later.
I have people from World War II to the current conflicts who are reporting kind of being victims of sexual assault during their military service. So it's hard to know if it's gotten worse or not. I think there's more, potentially, we hope, more reporting now. Mm-hmm. Certainly the bulk of people that I'm treating now are probably Vietnam and Gulf War I era. Mm-hmm. We have more and more people from the current conflicts. Mm-hmm. There are only a handful of World War II veterans who are coming forward. Okay. But we certainly have all conflicts represented. Now,
there's a stigma that's possible for anyone that's why they're afraid sometimes to come forward.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's a lot of, with any interpersonal trauma, and certainly sexual trauma is an interpersonal trauma, there's a lot of self-blame, shame, belief that I did something wrong or I should have done something to stop it.
They feel that way most of the time.
Yeah, certainly in society can do that. People around them might not want to hear about it. And then there's some suggestion that in the military it's particularly a concern because a soldier is sort of trained to be a warrior. You know, they're trained to be strong, and to be a soldier or airman or sailor and to also be a victim doesn't go together.
It's enough to make anyone ill, isn't it?
Yeah. So a lot of times that added sense of responsibility to your service, as well as then also kind of trying to reconcile the identity as a warrior and a victim doesn't go together. So that can also lead to more shame, which can lead to not sharing. And certainly the military wasn't open to hearing about this for many years. You know, so if you did report it, you were certainly told that it was your fault or something was wrong with you.
Wasn't there years ago that girl was a pilot and she was thrown out of the military because of some problem in the military? No, I don't remember if it was sexual or...
I don't know that specific story, but
she was
there are plenty of stories like that.
So it doesn't matter whether you're a private or an officer or anyone in between. As long as you've got a problem, you have to get taken care of.
Well, that's the other right. A lot of times, if someone did report, they were removed from the military, so they lost their career, and then of course that only makes you further feel that it's your fault.
It compounds.
It compounds your situation. Yeah, absolutely.
And mentally, now does PTSD come into that too?
Sure. Experiencing any kind of sexual trauma would be considered a traumatic event that could lead to PTSD. You know, post-traumatic stress disorder is something certainly we would screen for. We also have survivors of military sexual trauma who present with other anxiety disorders, generalized anxiety disorder, major depression. Sometimes we see with eating disorders. Substance abuse disorders certainly are also in there. So post-traumatic stress disorder is not the only kind of mental health problem that can be the result or influenced by having experienced sexual trauma.
Do you get anyone that's just come out, in other words, as they say, they've just decided they've been living with this for years, probably from the Second World War or Korea? Those aren't quite the ones you're working with. You are working with the newer ones. No, you're working with all of them.
With all of them.
But do they take them years to come out?
Most of the people that I'm working with, it has taken them years to come out, absolutely. I mean, anywhere from, 2 or 3 years to sometimes 40 years or more, that they might not have known it was a problem. Sometimes, I'm doing an outreach event and someone will come up and disclose it. I've had people that I've been treating for combat trauma, and then when they find out I have this job, they'll say, there's something I need to tell you.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That opens them up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that the outreach really helps. So yeah, and we do have a couple people who are immediately out of the service who do disclose because we screen everybody now. Since 2000, it's a mandate that the VA needs to screen all new patients. So there's sooner screening.
Very good.
And there's also some evidence that just by asking the question, has this ever happened, you're opening a dialogue and increasing the likelihood that people might answer yes.
Or know of someone that needs help badly that they could talk to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and refer them.
Right, like you were telling me earlier about, knowing someone that you were in the Legion with.
Was unexpected, but...
Right, so if you had the information it wasn't there at that time, but if you had that information, you'd be able to...
I found out where to go.
Yeah.
And that's what I always tell my people is, if I don't have an answer, I'll find someone that does. Because I can't have all the answers. I'm only the mother at home, As far as the families, how do they relate to this? Do they come in too and see you with, I don't want to use patient, but with a service person? Do you get any contact with them?
If the veteran would like me to have contact with them or their therapist, I'm not the only one who treats people with military sexual trauma. Certainly we're available for that and we would encourage that.
Because it does affect the family.
It does affect the family. Sometimes I will work with some of my veterans on maybe disclosing to a family member if they feel that would be helpful.
For their personal life.
For their personal life. Yeah. Sometimes it can be helpful, but typically I don't work with families because a lot of times people aren't necessarily ready to share with their family.
True, but it could help with their healing.
Sure, yeah.
And children in the family, they see there's something different between mommy and daddy or something. There are this secretive talking, and children, in fact, they learn a lot by listening, and they know how to listen.
And sometimes I always kind of work, because at the time of a sexual trauma, you sort of lost a lot of your power and control. One of the things we work with that's important is to help the survivor take back some power and control. So I always defer to them about who they want to tell, that this is their information and that they can't be required to tell anybody, that it's sort of their choice.
Yeah, because after they might be giving it to the wrong person who will aggravate it more than help them.
Right.
Yeah, because we're all strange, you know, we can't accept everything. So this is one very important one. I mean, it's tomorrow for some of these people, where yesterday was so bad, you know. So I didn't have to go through it in the military, thank God. So
I'm glad.
But
certainly plenty of men and women do.
Yeah, I know they do. Now especially more, it seems to, like you say, it came out. It's out in the open more.
Yes.
And so they're coming forward and they're getting the help they need.
I hope so, yeah. I think there seems to be a lot more dialogue about it. I mean, there was just an article in the New York Times yesterday. It seems to be kind of talked about. You said there was something on the Today Show or Good Morning America. So yeah, there's a lot more in the sort of popular media about it.
Yeah. This is supposed to be the month for this, I believe.
April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, which Department of Defense and VA also use for Military Sexual Trauma Awareness Month.
Good. And now the hospitals, does Brockton and the other one out in the western part of the state, do they all have a trauma center like you have?
All VAs
doing
are mandated as of the year 2000 to have a military sexual trauma treatment coordinator, which is one of my roles. They're all required to have that position. So there's a single contact person that anyone can call any VA and ask to speak to the MST coordinator or military sexual trauma coordinator, and the operator should know who that is and direct them right through, and they'll speak to someone who's going to understand and can help connect them with services.
Very good,
so it
because,
should be,
you know, I mean, we can't just be Providence, because southeastern New England goes to Providence.
Yes.
And north of Jamaica Plains and all those go to Brockton.
Right, so I'm the military sexual trauma coordinator for Hyannis, New Bedford, as well as Middletown, Rhode Island.
Yeah, so you've got
that in the C-box,
southeast.
yeah.
God's country, I call it.
Yeah.
When the snow comes and it goes around us, you know.
And then I will say that just because some of your people, you know, some of the people watching the show might go to Brockton, Sophia Reddy, who's a licensed clinical social worker, is the military sexual trauma coordinator for the Boston VA system.
Oh, good. Do you attribute the willingness for these people? Are they willing to confront their trauma, that the situations they're in? Do they obey, in the sense word obey, what you suggest?
Oh, I hope they don't obey what I suggest.
No, what you do to help them get, you know.
I think that when people come forward, they're often taking that first step to not avoid what's happening to them and kind of come forward and, you know, for lack of a better word, confront what happened to them.
Okay.
They're usually seeking treatment. Again, treatment's an option, it's a choice. It's not, you know, if they feel that they're kind of functioning pretty well and that they don't want to make a lot of changes, that's okay. You know, we have some people who just want to disclose. They want someone to know this happened to them. They want to just kind of sort of have someone bear witness to what their experience, but they don't necessarily want to proceed with a lot of trauma. They might not necessarily even have a lot of mental health issues. Not everyone who experiences sexual assault has serious mental health issues, and so I have that. I have a few people who just sort of want to kind of tell me their story, but they're not interested in treatment. But I'd say most of the people that come through have some interest in treatment.
Now, what type of treatment, whatever, generally that you can?
So I will say that there's, for the women, we have a group at the PTSD clinic. We have a women's program. We run. Usually we have 1 or 2 groups going on. There's kind of shorter term skills focused groups. Right now we have a dialectical behavioral therapy group. In the past we've had a cognitive behavioral therapy group. So we have those for the women. We also have individual therapy, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then for the men, I run 2 men's groups, which are mostly interpersonal based groups focused on they sort of have a supportive nature with a kind of interpersonal focus, giving and receiving feedback. They've been quite successful in targeting the shame issue, I think.
What about the mixture of women and men? Do you have anything?
We
like
don't
that?
at this time, although some VAs do that. Some of the residential programs that treat kind of sequelae of military sexual trauma
They've reached a certain level that they could do that.
They could do that.
Yeah.
We also have individual therapy for men and women. And again, not everyone has post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
So in our clinic, we treat post-traumatic stress disorder, where we would be offering cognitive processing therapy, which is a trauma-focused treatment, as well as prolonged exposure, which is a trauma-focused treatment. Those are the 2 empirically supported treatments for post-traumatic stress disorder. We also offer cognitive behavioral therapy, kind of to target depressive or anxiety symptoms. Basically, we kind of assess what the needs of the veteran are at the time, and then we would refer them to a therapist who is experienced with military sexual trauma to provide the treatment. And through our vet center, we also have couples counseling if that's what people are looking for.
Do they come down with the conditions that's from nerves, where they break out, skin conditions, or they have other type of problems, but it's all related in the sense that it goes back to what they've been hiding all this time?
That's a really good question. There is a kind of high rate of what we would call somatic symptoms that go along with sexual trauma. Gastrointestinal complaints, gynecological complaints for women, chronic pain, kind of chronic fatigue, migraines, certainly, anything that can be stress related or related sort of to the kind of stress system can happen.
It all affects your system,
absolutely. And sometimes the first way we find out that people can get referred to us is by repeated medical complaints that they can't find a cause for. So
at least they're projecting something ahead that might solve their problem, which they've been living with for such a long time. The human body is a strange thing. One thing can trigger another,
Absolutely.
And we find that a lot of people keep the secret. And they suffer through it for many, many years.
And it kind of comes out in different ways.
And then, they're not happy people, and maybe that's where suicides come in. I don't know, but when you get to a certain pressure point, something's got to give.
Yeah, and certainly suicidal ideation is an issue. It's something that a lot of our veterans with military sexual trauma struggle with, kind of chronic suicidal ideation, so we certainly address that in treatment.
Well, I always tell them when they, kind of lean in that way that, that's just a cop-out, because what you leave behind are going to suffer just as bad as you releasing yourself, and they look at me and say, oh, you have to be so smart. And I said, I'm not smart, it's just that I figured it out for myself, You get depressed at different times for different reasons, and you say, well, I might as well give it all up, And then you change your mind, because I've got 4 children. I got grandchildren. I mean, I don't want to leave them that as their heritage.
So able to find some hope there.
Then I go to my doctor and drive him crazy. How are we doing? Oh, good. Let's see here. Do you find an increase in the vets that are coming into you now over the, let's say, this first of this year to last year in relation?
It's hard for me to say. We're just into March, so it's hard to know. And I actually only I'm not necessarily informed of everybody who comes in and discloses, because sometimes it's happening in primary care and they're not requesting a referral to me. So it's hard to know, and I get the numbers the year after. So right now I'm still waiting to get the 2012 numbers. So based on the increase from, say, 2010 to 2011, yes, we do have more people coming forward.
So they know there's a place to go and to come get
Absolutely,
some help. Yeah, not only for physical therapy and other things, they've got the mental things
Yes,
now
we have
to get
mental health clinic, yep.
It says here the April is Military Sexual Assault Awareness Month. What is that, and how is VA done in the past to raise awareness? Do you know?
Sure. So April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month in the country. They have these months for everything now.
I know.
Cancer Awareness Month and so forth. So the VA and Department of Defense recognize it as Military Sexual Trauma Awareness Month. It's represented by a teal, one of those little ribbons. And so we do an event. I'm trying to think of what we've done. 2 years ago, we did a clothesline project, which is sort of a standard domestic violence, sexual assault awareness project. I don't know if you've heard of them.
I've heard of some of it.
They started, I think, at some rape crisis centers and domestic violence shelters where survivors would create a T-shirt to demonstrate their recovery, their experience, to sort of show, one T-shirt per person to kind of show that each of these is a person. So we did that 2 years ago. We had over 54 shirts created by men and women, both in our treatment program as well as some, veterans who just wanted to participate, who may have worked, maybe employees at the VA. And I think that was quite well received. It's surprising what some of the people how creative they can be in expressing their pain.
There's a lot of hidden talents.
Yeah, absolutely. And last year we we did a screening of the movie The Invisible War, which is the documentary, I think that was first shown in 2012 at the Sundance Film Festival, about military sexual trauma. So that, and I actually just nominated for an Academy Award. So we had a screening of that was open to veterans and staff. And from that, actually, a couple of the individual services, surgical service at the VA GI service requested a screening for their whole team. So we did that. And this year I don't quite know what I'm going to do.
Now, what would you say to the women veteran out there if you thought there was a few that had not come in and they have problems? How do you kind of entice them to trust you to come in and talk to you?
Oh, I'm not sure that I'm enticing them. I mean, I think that if I'm
you got to
talking
use some word. I
Yeah, I
don't
know.
I don't want to sell intelligence, you know.
I guess if I'm doing a presentation or I'm talking to a group of women, I try to, the first thing is to let them know that they're not alone, that this is a known problem, this is something that happens to a lot of women. I mean, current estimates are anywhere from 20 to 33% of women. That clearly they're not, you know, standing alone with this. And with men too, I would also kind of always say that this is something that happens, that I see a lot, that people at the VA have treated a lot, and then there's a place where they can, you know, come and talk about it if they think they want to.
Now, if a parent, the son or daughter comes home and they start to sit around, they're looking depressed, and the parent tells them, well, go see your doctor, and they don't want to, but they contact the VA. How much power or how much privilege do they have to interfere in that combination of getting that vet to you?
Assuming that the veteran's registered at the VA. Certainly we can't give the parent any information about the care that their child's receiving. We can listen and hear their concerns. We can certainly outreach that individual, you know, maybe call them and say, you know, your mom or dad called and said, you know, we're having some trouble. Is there something we can do to help you? It's always better if the veteran comes in themselves and shows a willingness. We can also sometimes provide some support for the parent. You know, maybe their child's not yet ready to come in for help, but we can certainly refer the parent or provide some, you know, support on the phone, give them some help in managing their child and making sure their child's safe, things like that.
That the depression isn't getting to the control of his life or her life.
Absolutely, right.
They're closing themselves off completely.
And listen, and if the parent is saying something certainly that indicates that there's an imminent risk, we would take action.
And what type of action can you take?
Well, certainly we can call the veteran and ask them to come in. We can, I mean, in extreme cases, if there seems like there's absolute imminent risk, like you know, my child's, you know, has a weapon and said he's going to kill himself and he's locked in the bedroom, we would most likely have to call the police to kind of actually intervene.
But you just don't say, oh, you can handle it, and hang up,
not,
you know.
No. I mean, and that would be an
give them a little
example.
bit of support too.
Right, absolutely, because one of the things is, you know, it's frightening to watch a loved one who's struggling, and so to provide some support.
It leaves a scar for everybody after, you know.
Right, they tend to.
They'll say, why didn't I do more? Why didn't I do more? And sometimes there's not much more you can do except contact someone that's going to take it from there, you know. Let's see. I asked, when they go in with symptoms and problems, are they kept near the home where they live, or are they transferred to other hospital areas or that have better facilities?
That would be the veteran's choice. Absolutely, right. So we have, if people don't want to travel to Providence, they're living in a CBOC area, we would have them, if their preference is to be treated in a CBOC, we would have them treated in a CBOC. Sometimes there are certainly some of the groups that we offer are kind of only offered in Providence, so they, you know, would have a choice to maybe have a primary treatment in the CBOC but come in for group. There are some residential facilities that are out of state that we refer to, but again, no one's forced to go to those programs. That would be a choice. You know, here's a 6-week residential program.
Now, what's CBOC? I'll ask you.
Oh, I'm sorry. The
Most people might not like
the community-based outpatient clinics.
Oh, okay.
So Hyannis, New Bedford, Middletown.
Yeah, our extensions, we have ours here,
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah,
right.
we fought to keep it too.
Also, all the vet centers. I know there's one in Fairhaven, New Bedford.
Yeah.
There's one in Hyannis. We have one in Warwick, Rhode Island. They also have designated military sexual trauma providers.
Yeah.
So we try to keep them as close to home as we can.
And we have a veterans transition house in New Bedford.
Yes.
Where the vets come in. Of course, they have rules and regulations, and there's usually close to 50 to 60 of them at a time. But they got to be clean.
Yep.
No drugs, no liquor, no nothing, because they're supposed to be working their way back to having a life. and they've done a good job. And they have a graduate house, and they have, they have 2 year levels. And I helped out there for a little while, and helped the families. And they're very into it, like you are. You like what you're doing. You're doing it as best you can, or you're extending yourself even a little more if you can. And they've done very well. And they've got a lot of young men that have gone back. They even got them going by bus, the van that they have, brown bag it by the 2nd year to Otis to work.
Oh, really? So they're getting them jobs?
Yeah, get them started. Nice. And then they come back, and after that, they go into the graduate house where it's a little less, they're more on their own, in other words. They're supposed to know what they're supposed to do to stay healthy, And then the next thing you know, they go into an apartment of their own. But see, they can't see their families. They have no, their children are, away until they get to a certain point.
Oh, I see, as part of the progression.
As part of their build-up, because they've been away from the family for quite a while, possibly. And they have to get back into that little, just have visiting hours and things like that. And they give out turkeys to all the city of New Bedford low-income people. Over 300 Thanksgiving dinners that
the city does? Oh, the transition house does it?
Yeah. And the vets deliver them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Are you involved with that?
I've helped there too, yeah. But as I get younger, I get tired and I don't do as much as I want to do, but I'm still trying,
You're still trying to keep.
Yeah, so, because Providence is my VA, I have to go to Providence for my things, so. Is there a symptom that, if you looked at a young lady and she was talking to you, or a young man, and they hesitated, and you knew there was something wrong, what type of symptoms or anything, is there anything that shows that you might pick up on? That
someone's a survivor of sexual assault? Not necessarily. I mean, it's something where the pain is on the inside, so there's not something that I would necessarily...
It doesn't project. Yeah.
No, I mean, they might, right, so someone who has depression or who's demonstrating PTSD symptoms or who has anxiety disorder could have sexual trauma. I mean, they could have physical abuse from childhood. They could just have depression and not have any trauma. They could have combat trauma. They could have witnessed, a terrible plane crash, whatever. So it's really hard to
know. It's hard to see it.
Right, and that's one of the things that I think a lot of times survivors feel that everybody can see it, that everybody knows or suspects, and often we can't.
Yeah, and they can't talk about it because people don't understand what they're saying.
Right, or they believe that people aren't going to understand, and some people might.
Well, if it's another vet, he may or she may have a little better, or someone trained in the area, but the average aunt or uncle probably
might not.
Might not unless they've been in the military.
And certainly a lot of veterans kind of don't want to believe that this happens.
That's true. That's true. Now you said you had some kind of a film that you was going to bring, and
oh no, I had Tom had asked me to bring some of the T-shirts from our clothesline project from 2 years ago, and I forgot them.
Well, we'll have to get you back on to see your T-shirts. And I think we've done a half hour.
You think so?
I think so.
All
Thank
right.
you very much.
I made it. Thank you.
You sure did. Thanks a lot. Thank you, New Bedford. Join us on our next program.
The flu is unpredictable and can be serious, even for healthy people. A flu vaccine is your best protection. Who needs to be vaccinated against the flu? You. Protect yourself, your friends, and your family. Get a flu vaccine. For more information, www.flu.gov.